It's impossible to appreciate what's going on with the Transfiguration unless you consciously factor in the reality that remarkable scene takes place just a few days after Jesus had for the very first time told his disciples he was going to die. And when he told his disciples in Matthew 16, verse 21, that he was going to die, they were offended. They were scandalized. And Peter, I think, speaking for the group, grabbed Jesus and said, "Far be it from you. It can't happen." And Jesus, of course, was upset with Peter and told him, "You savor the things of man and not of God." This is about 3 years into a 3.5-year ministry. This is after, for months and years, those disciples had followed Jesus. They had seen his miracles. They had done miracles in his name. They knew something palpably and objectively about the power and the reality of who Jesus was. And yet, when he began to talk about dying, it staggered them. It totally knocked them off their pins. And they began to wonder if he was really Messiah. And therefore, for that reason, Jesus took 3, Peter, James, and John, and he took them into a high mountain apart, not a mountain apart from others, but a high mountain away from the other apostles. Now, by the way, all of this is happening in the foothills of Mount Hermon, that 9,000-foot peak at the very north of what is today Israel. And it's a very rugged, mountainous territory. And Jesus evidently takes Peter, James, and John into a very, very secluded place. And he begins to pray, and he asks the disciples to pray, and they fall asleep. And then as they wake up, they see Jesus standing before them with an ineffable manifestation of light and glory, which will be his when he reigns as king in days to come. He had laid aside that external glory. And for just a few minutes, as they watch, they see him transfigured. Metamorphosed is the Greek word, but the point is that the caterpillar had become a butterfly. The veiled, the one who had so carefully veiled his physical glory took it to himself for a brief season. And the whole purpose of that experience was to reinforce the staggering faith of those apostles. And that's exactly what Peter gets out of it when he remembers it and says, "We did not bring you cunningly devised fables when we made known to you the power and coming," because we were with him in the holy mountain. We know he's Messiah. We know he's going to reign as Messiah because we got a down payment. We saw him in his physical glory. The point of the Transfiguration is to reinforce the staggering faith of the apostles. Now, 2 things real quickly. Number 1, it's interesting that he only took 3. And that would be another discussion as to why. Certainly, it's not hard to see why he took these 3. These were the more influential. It's my personal tentative opinion. I like to say I believe this with 2 or 3 fibers of my being, if you know what I'm saying. That probably the reason he didn't take all of them was because he didn't want to take Judas, because Judas had a role to play, and that's another issue. But at any rate, what's clear is he took only these 3, and I think the strategy was this, that these 3 were so influential that if he could get them back on board, then they could carry the team to the finish line. The other thing that's interesting is that as Jesus returns, Jesus, Peter, James, and John return, they find the other apostles trying to drive a demon out of a man and unable to do so. And when they say, "Why won't it work?" he says, "It is because of your staggering faith." Now again, the point is that in the context, what is it that has staggered their faith? It is Jesus' message that he's going to die. And I think that's exactly what the Transfiguration is all about. It just so, in such an interesting and compelling way, illustrates what a careful and sensitive and creative and resourceful teacher Jesus was. He's been trying to get this across to him. He sees how desperately crippled they are by the announcement. And so he is sensitive enough some days later to provide that sort of a condescending object lesson where God condescends to give him that physical glory just to reinforce their faith.